Hello everybody, welcome back to the Storytime channel. My name is Steven, and let's get right into the stories of the day. Can't order new chairs, but I can order parts? Let's build some new chairs. I worked for a number of years as a senior computer technician for a very large and well-known technology company. The room that repairs take place had a lot of restrictions and precautions. One such consideration was for ESD, electrostatic discharges. You couldn't wear any fabrics that might cause static, the mat that repairs were done on was ground, and every technician had a grounded wrist strap. All of the tools complied, and so did the chairs. The main focus of this compliance are the chairs. Over time, the cushions on the chairs were cracked, there were a ring along the base to put your feet on that was constantly loose or wobbling, the gas shock on a few chairs was shot, and there was a trailing chain piece attached to the base to ground the chair that was commonly missing. If this piece was missing, the chair was no longer ESD safe and could no longer be in the room. For whatever reason, the person who was supposed to take care of repairing or replacing the chairs just wasn't doing it. I finally got tired of this and stepped in. I emailed the department in charge and asked what needed to be done to replace a few chairs. The response I received was, "I am not allowed to order new chairs, it is not on the budget. I can, however, order the parts required to repair the chairs." I was then sent an order form listing all of the parts that I was authorized to order. I explained all of the issues with the chairs and how it would be more cost-effective to simply replace the chairs. No, I was not allowed, and I must order the parts if I want the chairs repaired. You can guess where this is going. 5 chairs needed replacing, so let's order us some parts and build 5 new chairs. I'm pretty sure the cost of all the parts and the shipping totaled more than just buying whole new chairs. On top of that, I was paid to disassemble the old chairs to salvage parts and then build the new chairs. Also, I could only do 1 chair at a time since the others were needed in the repair room. All of them are still in use except for the ones with the broken trailing chain. In the end, they spent a lot more money on my time to disassemble and reassemble these chairs than just ordering completely new chairs. I guess it comes down to this thing being some kind of budget and tax related thing, where buying a new chair doesn't qualify for some kind of tax break, but pieces is like an operational thing which does give them tax breaks. It basically leads to a bunch of dumb decisions. Hate my class? Too bad you forgot which one I was in. A favorite memory of mine from a terrible time. Business calc in college. I went to a big university and all undergrads in the business school, and a few other schools I believe, had to take business calc. Nightmarish course for the non-math people, and my professor made it all the worse. He was the kind of professor where if he saw someone doing anything other than paying attention, he would stop what he was doing, stare for a few seconds, and then yell or throw his chalk at them. One time we had someone up and leave in the middle of class. He retook attendance just to figure out who it was. Complete hothead. Well, I was dating this girl in one of his other business calc classes. Hers was only 50 minutes long 3 times per week, whereas mine was an hour and 15 minutes long 2 times per week. Apparently, he wasn't a tick in that class. I guess he just couldn't stand us. Maybe he just had us at a really bad time of day or something. Well, maybe 2/3 of the way through the semester, I had to miss an exam. No idea why, but I had a legitimate excuse and he was going to let me make it up in his office. Everyone took the exam on either Wednesday, 50-minute section, or Thursday, my section. I heard from the lady friend that he only required a 10 out of 15 to get a 100%. You could basically completely screw up or leave blank any 5 questions and those were gimmies. I thought, heck yeah, this went from being hard to easy just like that. So I studied and showed up on time, about 1 p.m. if I recall correctly the Friday after, so I hadn't been to class yet. As expected, the exam had 15 questions on it. At the top of my paper, he wrote in red ink, 1 p.m. to 1:50, indicating I only had 50 minutes for the exam. I thought about saying something because I definitely should have gotten an hour 15, but figured whatever. I only need a 10 out of 15 anyways, and the other class did it in 50. This guy is also a tick, remember, so I just kept my mouth shut. Next week, he's handing back tests. My class did not get the 10 out of 15 perk. We had to get 15 out of 15. Not sure if anyone else knew, but it was complete BS because it's stupidly easier to do well on 10 out of 15 versus 15 out of 15. He screwed my class over hard on that one. Fair would have been 10 out of 10 for the other class. Of course, he didn't tell us any of this. I got something in the high 70s, maybe an 80. Not bad, but I only had 50 minutes, MFer. I walk up to him after class and say, I thought we only had to get 10 out of 15 right. He sarcastically retorts, the other class only needed 10 out of 15, but that was to make it fair since they only had 50 minutes. But I only had 50 minutes. Holding up my test, pointing to his big red ink, trying to force a look of confusion. He takes the paper, looks at it for what seemed a long moment, dramatically scratches out the previous grade, writes a big fat 100% at the top and says, I guess I made a mistake. And that's how I pulled the A in business calc. Do any of you have stories where teachers showed extreme favoritism to maybe particular students, maybe particular classes like this? If so, let me know your story in the comments section down below. Don't mention his kids? Reminds me of a guy I used to work with. He would talk about his kids constantly, but if you ever mentioned his kids, for any reason, under any circumstances, he would lose his stuff and start screaming, Don't you talk about my kids? Don't you dare talk about my freaking kids! I once got this response when I told him I was sick of hearing about his kids. The stupidity of his response was completely lost on him. That POS would constantly use his kids as a human shield from any form of criticism and then claim that people were attacking his children. Another time, after one of his moronic rants, I simply said nothing to him. He gloated thinking he made a profound point. What's wrong? Nothing to say? You know I'm right. No, I just don't want to talk to you about that topic. What? Why? You know why. Are you threatening my kids? Don't you threaten my kids? He stormed off and I thought that was that. I briefly commiserated with my coworker who witnessed the whole thing. Minutes later, someone came out telling me to go see the boss in the office. The guy told the boss that I threatened his kids' lives. He then promptly went home so that I wouldn't be able to address his lies to his face. Meanwhile, I'm getting a call from the vice president of the company and treated as guilty right away. I told them that it was BS and that our coworker witnessed the whole thing. They didn't want to bring him in though, but they told me that they were taking this very seriously. I told them that they should just call the cops then. They all suddenly got very quiet. Then the VP finally spoke up. Well, I don't think we need to do that. I pounced on them with that. No, I think we do. You all seem to think that I threatened to kill another man's kids, and you're refusing to even listen to coworker who saw and heard everything, so we should just call the cops. It's a very serious claim, so it should be taken seriously. So let's call the cops, get them down here, get a full-on investigation going in which they can interview coworker and check the security cameras. That'll clear this up real quick. The boss told me to just go home since it was the end of the day. I made sure to point out that they were letting a guy that they had just insisted threatened to harm a child go. Reminded boss that he was a father. Asked him how he could let me leave in good conscience if he thought I was actually going to try and kill the other guy's kids. He just told me to go home again. Next week at work, other guy acted like he never went off all crazy like that. Boss tried to pretend it never happened. Never got an apology for the accusation either. That was the worst place I've ever worked. I'm wondering what's going on at this guy's home that makes him act so defensive like that. Maybe I'm just overthinking, but I hope it's not projection of anything. Clean the fryer just before Friday night rush? Yes, ma'am. As my current job begins to start back operation, memory brought back to me my previous years as a long-suffering line cook. For those of you who have worked this job, you know it is simultaneously the best and worst job in the world. The people are great, but if it wasn't for the low pay, long hours, working conditions, stress, anyway, I was in management training at the time and this was used constantly to coerce me into doing many downright dangerous things, such as in this story. But this time it bit them in the rear. This is not exact as it was a few years ago, so exact times may be off and words not correct, but it's as close as I can remember and will happily answer questions for clarification when I can. The story. On this particular Friday, I was working what we called salad side, which meant I was in control of the salads, pizza oven, and fryer. While it could be a lot to juggle during busy hours, I had managed to get into a pretty good groove through the morning shift. With no orders in the window, no tables on the floor but a bar regular, the day's prep all finished and the area cleaned and restocked, I was looking at a good 30 minutes break between my shifts. We didn't get one scheduled, nor were you guaranteed a meal on a double shift. You only got one if you finished on time. I figured that I, for once, had a good chance at a break. After checking with the other line cook on duty, I let the general manager, or GM, know I was ready to go on break and to check my part of the kitchen. From now on, she will be referred to as Lazy Daisy because that is what she was. Lazy. She is the source of many terrible events in this building, and her nickname used here comes from these. She walks and immediately goes to the deep fryer, which had been forgotten about by the previous night's crew as is tradition. Why isn't this been cleaned out? Because it's in the middle of the day, we can only clean it out at the end of night shift, and the night cook didn't do it last night like it is scheduled. I can do it after close tonight though. The oil was too viscous in the morning when I arrived, and the sickly pump could not cycle the thick oil through the gunk trap properly. Therefore, the oil must be heated up first, but it has to be allowed to cool down enough to safety cycle the oil. Even if we tried anyway, the time spent cleaning the fryer prevented a lot of essential prep work to be done before opening, and then you had to hope the fryer would be ready before opening. While this may not be a problem with some fryers, this old girl has seen better days and took forever to get started. Often the opening manager coming in at 8 AM had to turn it on to make sure it was alive for the 11 AM open. The current roster managers usually refuse to allow it to be taken offline during normal hours, as they didn't want to have to deal with the "but my nuggets" problems, so I didn't think to come to her about it. No idea what possessed her to want it done now of all times. Quit being lazy and swap out the oil and clean this fryer out. It's disgusting. This is not the attitude I want in future management. And good future management would know not to change out the fryer oil that is currently sitting at almost 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 200 degrees Celsius. I could lose a hand doing that. It will take a while to cool and clean. If you don't change the oil and clean it up right now, I will have a talk with area director and discuss this promotion of yours. She then proceeded to strut back to the office to ignore her job and eat her lunch. This was doubly insulting as I have not had a chance to have my own lunch now. I sat there for a moment, kind of just seething until the other line cook came over and said, "Don't. It's no safe. Mucho caliente." I nodded in agreement, trying to figure out what to do. I have ignored her in the past on these kinds of things, but it never ended up with me on top. We stood there for a moment, silently trying to figure out what to do. He was a good man and very concerned for my safety and was adamant I not even try since I had a bit of an injury reputation. That's when light bulbs popped in my head. Oh, I'll make sure the fryer is clean alright, and I'll make sure that oil is replaced. You know, the rush starts in not too long, and since my night shift starts in a few minutes, no need to do it quick. The other line cook stood there for a moment looking at me like I was crazy, then smiled, eyes closed, shaking his head at me as if to say, "You are an idiot and you are gonna hurt yourself." He then shouted out, "Heard, servers, 86 fried," him letting the servers know we couldn't do fried items. I put no effort into doing the next step swiftly. I cut the heat, then headed out to the back dock and grabbed this metal tube on wheels we used to transport the old grease. While the grease typically was not insanely hot when transporting it out, it was still at a mean temperature and needed a lot of precautions as it would quickly heat up the metal. I won't bore you with the steps required of changing and cycling grease, but know that several times hot speckles of oil popped onto my face and arms. It was painful, but I knew this sacrifice will be worth it. As I am perfecting the art of gunk poking, several tables walked into the door, including a 12-person table, of mostly little kids. I was able to see them because the majority of the kitchen was visible from the dining room and vice versa because of the open concept design of the restaurant. The server whose section it was groaned because night shift was still several minutes away from arriving and she hadn't even finished looking at her snaps. Oh, how fortuitous. Lazy Daisy began to stir in her office, so I knew I had to rush this next step. I pulled the gunk trap out, slid in the wheeled grease tube, and began to drain, making extra sure the flow wasn't strong enough to splash and burn my feet off. Since it was only a 2-slot fryer, this happened very quickly. Just quickly enough that she arrived as the last drop went into the tube. The distant childish chorus calling out, "I want cheese sticks," could be heard in the background. "What is taking so long? We have customers now and the grease isn't swapped out. Why did you waste so much time cleaning?" I simply shrugged as the night shift began to walk in. It takes time to clean it out with it being so hot, I had to be extra careful. You demanded I clean it and I haven't even had time to wipe it with a towel yet. But it's still too hot, I would need to wait. I wasn't lying, the metal was still extremely hot and she knew that. As if on cue, I heard a ticket print and despite my pretty bad eyesight, I could see it as plain as day what was on the ticket. 3 orders of the best mozzarella sticks this side of the balcones. I guess the server was too busy playing on her phone to hear the other line cook call 86. Oh well, that's not my problem. Lazy Daisy turned and looked at the ticket, then gave me a death glare. "How long?" I shrugged again. Usually takes a bit. The left fryer is still acting up, but I can crank up the right. Still gonna take a bit with the new grease. Lazy Daisy puts her hand to her forehead, frustrated. "Just put the old grease back in." Because of the rapidly rising heat of the wheeled grease tube and lack of hand grips besides the one next to the opening, and the significant number of obstacles in the cramped kitchen, it was now impossible to put the grease back in without severe risk to anyone nearby, and she knew that. No can do, if I try the grease will be spilling everywhere and I will probably have to go to the hospital if I try. Even if it doesn't spill, I will still have burned hands. And do you really want all these guys seeing me pour grease from this dirty, grease-encrusted tube? Lazy Daisy had this look of absolute defeat and she marched over to deal with the table as I dumped the cold, thick new grease into the fryer, then poured the old grease into the grease bin on the back dock. The fallout. The left fryer took forever to heat back up and wasn't ready until well after the rush was in full swing. The right side was much quicker but still took quite a while anyway. Aging and broken equipment was common in this building and commercial grease fryers are not often prized for their turn on speed. The parents of the little kid army were complete and total Karens and began shouting obscenities at Lazy Daisy, which could easily be heard over the growing bustle of the restaurant and the snickering of the line cooks. The other morning line cook even found an excuse to stay an extra few minutes to watch before he headed out for the night. Lazy Daisy then spent a good part of the night going from table to table explaining that there was no fried items, as servers never pay attention to any 86 call, no matter how many times it is repeated. And as a current server, I admit to doing this far too often to be this judgmental. This only infuriated and stressed her out even more. Once the right side fryer had finally heated up, she spent even more of the night explaining why all the chicken parms, eggplant parms, nuggets, wings, fries, mozzarella sticks, etc. were running so far behind. After all, we only had half the usual frying capacity. She ended up having to buy a lot of food for the tables and stay late to put out fires, as the other manager Lucy was terrible with tables, all of which was in perfect view of me. Thank you, Open Concept Kitchen. After close, I got a stern talking to from Lazy Daisy and Lucy, but they knew I had won this round and knew that Lazy Daisy was the one who demanded I clean the fryer so soon before the night began. I never ended up eating lunch that day, but before I turned off the fryer for the night, I made sure to sneak out with one quick item, a batch of 5 delicious mozzarella sticks. I think it was uninspired management. They just tried to find something for you to do, boss 2 around or whatever, and obviously they weren't thinking 2 and 2. I would like ice on the bottom. I used to work in a cafe/diner as a waitress. My job is your typical food runner and sometimes bus duty if we are understaffed. Always. Anyway, one day we had a group of college group who most were really nice, but one in particular was the clown. He started off with dumb jokes. When I was writing up orders, he responded with, "Food please," or a cheeseburger without cheese. When asking for drinks, he responded with, "A nice cup of water with ice at the bottom." with some of his buddies telling him to shut up and waving me an apology. Well, no problem, buddy. You can thank my 7th grade science professor warning us to not lick metal poles when it was cold, or it'll stick like in the movies. I went back to fulfill this specific request to the T. I grabbed one of our milkshake tins, gave it a quick rinse, and packed ice cubes at the bottom. I crushed some additional ice and added them, allowing the entire thing to form one solid cold clump, and being cold enough, stuck to the wet interior of the tin. I returned triumphantly, plopping down the tin in front of the fool. Water, ice at the bottom as per dear customer's request. At first he was confused as he was the only one with a metal tin, then I hear him suddenly mutter, "Holy sh," but was cut off by the rest of his group cheering in disbelief that I had conquered his quest. He and the rest of his buddies even took a few pictures of the cup and before leaving slipped me a personal tip as a thank you. Since then, our diner special was ice at the bottom as a running joke, and everybody gets a new kick out of it when they see it. There was some real ingenuity to craft the ice cubes at the bottom of the cup. Sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit. My mom was an overnight manager at a truck stop. She regularly had to deal with drunks and the obnoxious Sunday morning crowd. There was a man that came in every Sunday morning, very early. No sooner than his order would hit the window, he would start yelling loudly, "Is it done yet? Where's my food?" and other rude things. The staff cringed when he walked in. My mom had enough. This particular Sunday, after a very rough Saturday night full of drunks, this man walks in with his usual crew and sits at his usual table. Just like clockwork, he started yelling as soon as his ticket hit the window. Mom threw a biscuit on the plate, added a piece of cheese, raw sausage patty, then cracked an egg and added the top part of the biscuit. She took him his order personally, slammed the plate down in front of him and calmly asked him if he wanted his food now or if he wanted it cooked. He never yelled after that day. He became one of the nicest and best tipping customers. I'm surprised for a guy that's so bold as to start immediately yelling when their ticket goes up that they would back down so easily and just stop yelling after that. But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is, which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know in the comment section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel today. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.